Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I am Andrew Sumner, and this is Kieron Gillen, the one and only. How are you today, Kieron?
I'm really good. I've just realised this hand's got a plaster on because I've cut my finger.
Yeah.
So like this isn't like normal. Though one of the things when I'm writing, I occasionally the quip of my finger gets hurt. So if I'm on a really busy day, I've got half my fingers covered in plasters. That's not what's happening today. Anyway, sorry, Andrew.
I'm with you, mate. That is a testament to how prolific you are, mate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Prolific writers often injure their fingers. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk about something I think is pretty special, actually, mate, which is this beautiful deluxe limited slipcase edition coming out from Boom in April of Once and Future by yourself and the great Dan Mora. So what can you tell me about the book? For those who might not have read it before, and what can you tell me about this edition?
Well, Once and Future, like the core of it is slightly idiotic academic, like 20-something boy who's been brought up by his grandmother, realizes that is dragged into the family firm. He's had no idea that, oh yeah, grandma's a monster hunter. Eventually realizes his mum was a monster hunter too. And they stopped because they ran out of monsters. And now monsters are back. So it's kind of like that kind of, that's the odd couple nature is so there, and you can imagine like Buffy hitting 70. That's kind of the vibe with Bridgette. So that's kind of like they're our main characters. But the other sort of side of it is I was sort of watching like The Mummy and like actually Indiana Jones as well, and this is like about a decade ago, and it was the third Mummy, or before they did reboots, the one set in China.
Yeah,
I had a moment ago, it's a bit weird, isn't it? Like the idea, like, you know, the whole adventure genre has that colonialist underpinning of, you know, we're taking the founding people of another civilization and turning them into these monsters, which we now hunt and kill. And like, oh, you know, the more I think about it, the more that bugged me. And I found myself thinking, if I was going to do that sort of story, because there's so much fun in that story, how could I do it? And I realized, I would use King Arthur. Like you do it with the Western canon, and like you turn them into monsters, and that's where you kind of end up. So you've got grandmother, grandson, monster hunter team against an undead, monstrous King Arthur, and we kind of gone from there. And it's one of the things like that's the high concept, and then everything gets folded in.
Yeah.
And we're up to actually like issue 20. I think 24 came out, so we hit this bit and we realized, oh no, let's do a really nice slipcase, and it's first 18 issues, which is the first 3 arcs, which builds up to a really big status quo change. It's that kind of I must say, it's such a big status quo change. There was a part of my head I was thinking maybe this is the end of the book. I was aware that if I wanted to stop there, I could, because it's so apocalyptically big. But I actually knew I worked out where I wanted to go from then. The slipcase, it's been a journey to make this. I mean, it's a beautiful object. Of course, with the production problems in COVID, it's been delayed and manufacturing's been difficult. But I think it's really worth the wait. It's just such a lovely, it's just a lovely thing. It's also like, I'm somebody who like buys in different formats, but like when I'm like when you reach those hardcover formats, it's like, oh, I would like something in a deluxe thing which looks beautiful on the shelf and you think is worth the extra. And in the case, like, you know, it's Dan and Tamra, who are just, I'm quite a heavy writer. When I say I mean I write heavy, I write a lot. There's usually a lot of research, but for me, so much of the joy of this book is seeing like Dan and Tamra unleashed. And like when I'm writing it, it's almost every issue I go, okay, what new monster can I make Dan make up? And then Tamra does the lysergic colouring over it. You know what I mean? So like it's a lot freer.
What a brilliant phrase to use, mate. That's absolutely spot on. I get that completely.
Yeah. So like the roller coaster of it, and the fact it's such an art-led book, I feel that if it's a good format to have it in, you know, like you get bigger pages and you can see Dan, who is like, obviously he's over in Batman now as well. Yeah. So he's actually doing Once and Future and Batman simultaneously. And you just see him develop and become who's clearly a superstar. You know, it's an insanely beautiful book.
Yeah, and it's collecting the first 3 story arcs. Am I right, mate?
Yes, the first 3 stories, which is the first one, as mentioned, it's the introduction to Arthur and the Duncan and Bridgette's history and that. The second arc is it's when we start expanding the mythology a little. Like we bring Beowulf in, actually, is the kind of big twist. And then you realize, oh, wait, so it's not just Arthurian myth, it's also other myth. No, actually, myth's the wrong word, actually. Story is probably the best way to put it. And then the third arc is the Arthur and the Arthur stuff coming crashing back in, building towards an exciting climax. And it's like, it was originally Once the Future was, okay, this is a 1 arc story. and I'll be able to come back to it, because I knew there was more stuff there. But like when we made it an ongoing, it's like there's just so much stuff there. And it's even now, it's almost like I mentioned earlier that almost every issue is me saying, hey Dan, have a take on this. And that's kind of like, it's a bit like, you know, those kind of like alternate dimension superhero stories where you say, okay, what does Superman look like in this dimension? What does Batman look like? We're kind of like that with Arthurian monster. So it's like, okay, what's our Gawain? What's our Yvain? What's our, I don't want to like spoiler the people who are on Arthurian, but there's other people who are completely outside the Arthurian mythos who you see in this context. Which is great, because it's like, what the hell's it? I mean, there's a creature called the questing beast, which is like, well, I mean, not obscure Arthurian, but like, that's the sort of thing you know if you know Arthurian, but like, you wouldn't know in pop culture necessarily. And like, that's an issue 1, and immediately it's got this weird sort of Hydra-headed thing. And one of the it's called the questing beast because it's involving knights and stuff, but it's also a pun because it's got a belly full of like dogs who are hunting. So his belly is extending these snapping hounds, and questing is what dogs do when they chase their prey. So like I've created like, it's quite quirky animal in quite a lot of the sources. Dan renders it as this kind of like monstrous creature, and that's so much our things. Like, what does our Guinevere look like? You know what I mean? All these kind of like, it's not a clue. It's not just a random pretty lady. You know, all these kind of it's like, how do you make this stuff like live? And it's nice that Arthurian feels quite cool at the moment. I mean, like the Green Knight last year.
Oh man, what a great film, mate! What a great film! Film of the year, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I
loved it. Yeah.
I can't stop, like, anytime I look at it, I can think of it as a Taskmaster episode now. And this kind of like, anyway, that's just my brain.
I completely get that, mate. That's it. What a beautiful way of looking at it. The great thing about Arthurian myth or legend, storytelling, whatever you want to call it, and I say this as a person who wrote a dissertation for my English degree about Le Morte d'Arthur. So, you know, it's something that's it's very resonant to me, and it's very interesting here to you talk about your approach. But do you find that, given the disparate nature of all those stories, because they don't just come from one source, they come from many sources, do you have people coming up to you going, what about this? Making suggestions about elements of those legends?
I mean, people always ask, when is Mordred going to turn up? And like, he's not. Well, I've got other stuff, because I think like what you actually pick up on, the fact that it doesn't come from one source, is the story. Because it's like, the story for me is like how Arthur has been used to explain the nature of Britain, or the matter of Britain, across all this period. So you get different ideas of what Arthur is, and that's, I mean, like one of the fundamental ones is, you know, I mean, spoiler for the first issue because it's the opening one. It's like it's a group of like British nationalists bringing back Arthur in a kind of Britain for the Britons way, without realizing, like, of course, you know, original Arthur, as such as the thing, is a Welsh nationalist. So it's like, you know, the people who Arthur was fighting were Anglo-Saxons, as much as, you know what I mean? And like, but that's the theme of the book. I said, how have these stories reflected ourselves in different ways through different periods? And like, that's much more like the 4th and 5th arcs, when we kind of get into like almost a multiplicity of Arthurs. Like at one point, like when Lancelot turns up, like in the 3rd trade, like Lancelot is a very different aesthetic, because of course Lancelot is a later French insertion from the romances, and like you get a different, like Gawain, how Gawain's role has changed. And like my research, I mean, you know, and I've read, you know, parts of the parts which I need to, but my research about it is much more higher level in terms of, okay, how has Gawain changed across the period? What is the social differences between you know, the histories and the romances, and, you know, all these different approaches to the thing. I mean, like, okay, we haven't quite got to Monty Python yet, but like, that's not impossible either. And in some ways,
wonderful.
Yeah, we eat our own tail, because I'm sure that eventually we'll be writing about ourselves, as in how the story, like, Once the Future, is changing Arthurian myth as well. So it's one of those great things where something that's a problem, as in there's no original source and there's so much stuff in it, is the story. It's the material, and it's like even the characters are kind of confused over which Arthur they may be, like that kind of stuff. So like that's very much what the story is, which is fun.
Yeah, I think it's something that I very much respond to as a reader, and anybody who hasn't read the book yet, this is really a physically beautiful jumping on point for it. So that's Once and Future the deluxe limited slipcase edition, which collects the first 3 story arcs by Kieron and by Dan. And if you've not checked this out, it is really a wonderful book. So it's available from the links attached to our conversation. Kieron, it's a pleasure as always, mate. I look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks for having me on, Andrew.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.